We're going to show building a cloud from bare metal. We're going to show registering that cloud to the ops manager and immediately start managing it. We can show you a seamless experience between Amazon and private cloud and how everything just looks seamless. And finally, we will just play some videos of Kubernetes as a service or analytics as a service, and we'll do it that way. Yeah.
Okay. So let's begin with the first one, actually, building a cloud, right? So here, it's very simple, right? So as simple as, like I mentioned, right, the Rovius takes, you have to create your blueprint. What exactly the cloud configuration you are deploying, how many zones, how many pods, how many clusters in a pod, et cetera, et cetera. So you define that in a very simple sort of a YAML file. And here's an example of a simple YAML file, right? So you create number of, you have a rack has clusters as hosts, and then you have identified the MAC addresses and the IP addresses that you would want to assign.
Gives you the IPMI addresses there.
Right? So this is one for the compute nodes. There is a YAML, similar YAML for the storage. So storage you could define whether you want SDS, you want SAN, you want any other, or you want all of them. You can define it into a YAML file. So the steps are very simple. You take the blueprint, you prep the hardware, the compute nodes. That means we will actually take your bare metal provision virtualization that you have chosen. If it's already provisioned, you don't have to provision. Otherwise, we'll do a PXE boot of all the servers. We will configure the storage. We'll prep your entire hardware, create the clusters, et cetera, all the tasks that is needed, and then start provisioning this cloud blueprint for you. It's very simple to do this. With that, I'll just walk, Jaideep, can you walk us through some of these steps, right? Yes, so let's take a YAML, you're going to take a YAML file first. And this is the Rovius configurator. This is the tool which will start configuring it. This is the administrator gets access to this. So here you got a rack. We just took 2 hosts for the demo purposes. We just take 2 hosts, but it can be number of racks. Doesn't matter. We are going to create a Zen server cluster with this, two servers, and validate the hardware. Just make sure the hardware is reachable through IPMI and stuff like that. So once it's validated, you go to the next step. And then this is provisioning Zen server virtualization. So down the road, we'll be able to provision other virtualizations, KVM, VMware, et cetera, as well.
Do you have any customers actually running SAP on Zen server or SAP as a managed service for you? I know you just called it SAP cluster. That's quite Is that actually SAP or no?
It's just some random.
Just an example. Okay.
Name. no significance. Yeah. So we got a Zen server cluster ready. Next step, we'll go configure the storage, right? So let's take a look at, again, just upload a storage YAML file. And in this storage YAML file, we said we're going to use an NFS server, and we're going to use a SAN, it's an iSCSI target, and then we're going to do an SDS. So you may have everything, or you may just have one of them, but you need some kind of storage for these templates and things like that, which typically would be your NFS server. So at the least, you need an NFS server to continue. So again, validate this, make sure that all the storage systems are reachable, accessible. You configure and go provision, and you're good to go. Now, once the storage is configured, the hardware compute nodes are configured, you will assign that storage to the cluster. Is that what you're doing, JD?
Yes,
no?
It'll internally do it.
Yeah,
But
it's going to take some time. So I'll switch to
the
environment which is kind of similar, where this step is kind of done.
But this is still live.
So it's actually booting the servers and booting storage. So it takes about 10, 12 minutes. So instead of waiting, we've prepped a second environment where that piece is done.
So
right.
So
these hosts
kind of prepared.
Hosts are prepared. So Zen server is installed.
These are also kind of
The
registered.
storage is registered. We have a SAN that we're going to use here.
Then go to the cloud.
And now you're creating a cloud blueprint. Now you have to define zone. zone is at the data center level, availability zone, and then pods are at the rack level. So I'm going to use TFD, one rack, and then inside that rack we'll have a cluster of Zen servers, hosts, and then the storage that we just prepped, and then you finally configure the networking, right? So then in this case, we've got 2 NICs, so you configure basically which NIC is going to use what traffic is going to through which NIC. So you configure that. In this case, management and storage are on the same NIC, NIC 0. So this is what you have configured, and it's good to go, right?
Yeah, if
Jerry?
you do the same steps, you go and validate a bunch of stuff.
Again.
You provided the IP range, etc. So we make sure that it's not used currently.
Okay.
And so on.
Okay, there you go. Once the validation is done, we fire up the provisioning, and we good to go. And this provision takes about few minutes, 10 to 15 minutes.
I'm assuming it doesn't do anything for the actual network switch. Does it log into the switch and configure VLANs or anything like
It
that?
assumes that you've
Assumes
created the
that
VLAN space.
Trumped them or something.
You created the VLAN space already. Again, I mean, we're trying to solve every admin knows how to create VLAN spaces, so we're trying not to solve that problem. It gets into the problem of how many devices you support and stuff like that. So, we're leaving that alone. We assume the VLAN space exists. We're going to use the VLAN space in the network.
Sure.
Okay.
And now this will take a few minutes, so I'm going to switch to yet another environment where the cloud is kind of done.
It's done. So the provisioning has happened.
I have a
You've created-
question.
Sure.
Which step created the zone? Because I didn't see on the last one, I didn't see like
So-
you
The
could
cloud
add
step created the
zone.
So
So-
I'll watch.
So there was the
The
blueprint.
first couple?
Yeah, so there
Okay.
was a screen where you say, you define your data center, rack, clusters, etc.
Okay.
So that is what the
This is
blueprint
the one.
you created
This is
was.
the one that created the cluster there.
Well, so I see the zone there, but
Yeah.
I don't see add zone. Do you know what I mean? Like how did,
No, so
or maybe we
before,
don't care, maybe, I don't know.
no, we, in this YAML we said there is one zone, we call this zone as TFD,
Okay.
right? And then in zone, we assigned the pod we said, okay, there is one pod with 2 hosts that we prepared and the storage.
So did that happen in the first couple steps you showed us?
So the way so if you see, let me just go to the first
Because
step.
like I said, you don't see add zone
yeah.
on
No,
that
add just-
particular one, so I just was wondering,
No, so
which step
the
did
zone
it?
is a logical entity, which is part of the cloud. What we are doing is here defining in this step, if you see, we are defining a rack here. And then in the second environment, we went ahead and added the zone.
No, she's asking how do
No.
I add
did
it?
that
Add
do
more
there?
zones.
Yeah, right now.
Did the zone get created in the YAML file?
Okay.
So the YAML.
Yeah, I mean, so this is very simple blueprint that we picked for demo purposes,
Sure.
but you will have capability to add more zones.
Okay.
But I think what she's asking is where do you define the zone? And you
That's in the
define the zone in the
definition file.
YAML
There are
file.
That's in the
right?
YAML file.
So today, all of this is driven from YAML. You got to format the right YAML to have what you have. So we don't have a UI-driven provisioning. We sort of assume that people would prep YAML files with the appropriate things and write it in, and that shows up in provisions.
Okay.
We don't, that's the initial approach we've taken because tons of data is painful to sit down in a UI and type it. So we've taken a config file that you give, and then we take and provision that.
Okay, which you
But
didn't
you probably
show.
want to do
No,
both. Well, so
They did
in
show
your,
the YAML
They,
file.
they did.
in the.
You're
prod-
absolutely right.
was
We
the
have to do the UI.
No,
for
I'm
that.
asking a clarification. I
Might
started
have
with
been.
but, which was a bad
No.
practice. So you've defined things in this YAML file, and now you've brought it in, and now zones are something that are in here that we could go look at, or are they
Correct.
still?
Once you log in as an administrator for cloud platform, you'll be able to see what zones are already created.
And what's in them and?
What's in
Yes.
them and all
Okay,
of that.
and all the
Yes.
metadata. and-
This is
okay.
more the configurator.
Got it.
That's more the administrative function.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, so our cloud is ready. So we just switch to the other pre-provisioned prepared environment because that may take a few minutes to actually go configure the entire thing. But this is already configured. This is ready. He logged in as an administrator to that cloud. Now, what the very first thing you could do is onboard the users. And one way to do this would be to configure, integrate with your Active Directory or LDAP, something. So in this case, a select user group is actually configured to be able to use the cloud that we just built, right? So once this integration with Active Directory is completed, that particular user group is going to be able to log in and launch the virtual machines and other resources.
So if you have missed, I kind of click this, say go to my cloud, the one that I have prepared right now. That
brought up this window. So I'll just log in now to a newly prepared cloud as one of the enterprise users. So that's my LDAP domain that we had configured. So, and this is what I kind of see. This is the end user cloud console.
So end user can go launch virtual machines, provision storage volumes, etc., etc. This is very typical of cloud platform or OpenStack or any other console would let you do this. So he's going to go provision a local virtual machine in the zone that we just created, right?
I'm picking up a template, service offering. Picking up the network that was created for my account. And just launch the VM. So this is kind of very standard flow. If you do this in Amazon, it looks very similar. If you do it over here, it's very similar. And this becomes even more interesting when we kind of will show you the hybrid part, going through the very similar flow for creating a virtual machine in Amazon.
Oh.
And obviously this is all API driven as well, so you could
ask that.
CLI.
Everything is API driven.
CLI is there.
It's Cloud Stack at the core, so all Cloud Stack APIs are available.
And then everything that was in that sort of configuration box before covers everything that's available in that API?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So there's a
Yes.
configurator API and the cloud
Yeah.
API
Yep.
that the end user can consume. So both are available.
So literally, it's as easy as this. I mean, this was production cloud I was building. I would do exactly these same steps. Within hours, I will have the cloud and the end users using it. It's very simple.
Doesn't actually take hours, but it's as long as it takes to boot your IPMIs. Several tens of minutes, few tens of minutes.
Okay. So the VM is done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will take like maybe another minute or so. But you can move to another.
Go to the ops manager.
Your ops manager transition going to change.
Yeah.
You just kind of make a point.
Yeah, this is sort of your before and after. Normally building a private cloud, you would have gone through all of those steps. Now it is as easy as uploading a blueprint and then clicking go and it gets you a private cloud up and running.
I'll go back to that API question because, okay, there's Cloud Stack APIs underneath, but I don't want to consume Cloud Stack. I want to consume Rovius. So are the Rovius unique APIs?
Yeah, so Rovius has APIs at the configurator level, ops manager level, and for provisioning an actual VM, it is actually, we just expose the Cloud Stack API. When you're an end user, you want to provision a VM, that's an end user API, and the cloud technology inside Rovius is Cloud Stack.
Right.
So that API would be Cloud Stack API.
Okay.
So, question on this part here is about building a cloud, and it's much easier to do that. I only need to do that once, though. Like, how often am I going to deploy a new cloud?
You would expand a cloud. Oftentimes, you want to add machines to your rack. You want to provision a new zone. Typically, what we think is that weekly there are administrative operations which are turning up machines, turning down machines, doing some storage stuff. Continues happening. There's always clouds are being tweaked.
And that to me is far more interesting than, hey, I can build like a thing that is difficult to build, but I only have to do once. I don't care because
we'll come there now.
80-90% of it.
Yeah, so ops manager.
I'll answer that in kind of two parts. One is doing this, try to create a private cloud using technology that works and more predictable versus trying yourself for days, months is the difference between a success and failure of your project.
His
right?
point is that,
No, no,
look,
so
you know,
that-
you made installation easy.
Yeah. So if
Now
I'm
I
gonna
got to run
this-
the cloud on an everyday basis, and that is the next demo.
Yeah, because if I'm making an investment that's going to last me 5 to 10 years,
Yeah.
2 weeks versus 3 months, I don't care. If I'm going to, depending on what the outcome is that I get, but I'm making a long-term investment. This is not something which I'm just like. I care more about the time delta when it,
Yes.
as a percentage of total time. It's not really that big.
That's where the ops manager becomes interesting
Yeah.
because the cloud. See,
It's neat.
It's not.
Don't get me wrong. It doesn't like yes, doing it faster is good. Awesome.
No, it's
But-
not. It's not only faster. It's basically eliminating the human errors. We don't want people to be making mistakes and redoing over and over again.
As long as you
So
got
this
your
is the-
VLANs provisioned correctly. Which,
The validation. Once you yes,
It's in the
Everything's
YAML
racked and
file.
paced
so
correctly
That's
and-
where all the typos would be. So
Yeah.
how do we protect against that?
or the validate button.
No, there is a validate. We do validate.
You
that there are
validate.
errors in that.
once you validate, that's the value in this.
But I can
quick
also
is-
see new models of cloud consumption coming along where people are going to, instead of having one big Amazon VPC, they're going to be having smaller VPCs per department app or that kind of thing, and being able to then spin up a full Amazon VPC. Of course, you can do that in Amazon's own tools, but if you've got cross clouds, maybe there are some.
And that's easier when
opportunities
it's
with that.
faster to spin it up and spin it down. Then that starts to matter.
We'll show that.
And
as well. Spinning up a VPC, we'll show that as well.
And I'll-
we can do it from this console.
Can we go back one slide, because we've been talking about the deployment doesn't really matter in the long run. I do agree with Justin. What does bother me is that I don't see in the Rovius kind of deployment that it is actually HA, that it does hook into LDAP, et cetera, et cetera. So the stuff that enterprises care about, like HA, LDAP, is that also in the Rovius deployment model?
LDAP is there.
Yeah.
HA is not today, and that will come by the end of the year.
Okay.
we just try to oversimplify the demo because it's a demo, right? So
HA
I'll
or
tell you.
DR, they're different.
So HA is one, DR is one. HA basically means that your management plane has a failover. Even that is not there today. And that is coming up in a much sooner release.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The second SQL Server cluster, setting up that is coming up in a much sooner release. The DR is coming more towards the end of the year.
Okay.
So HA would be here in the next month and a half or so. And DR would come more towards the end of the year.
And when you say management plane, you also mean the control plane?
Yeah, correct.
So you'd
The
have like
SQL
a pair of.
Correct. So basically, there is a SQL Server running. So we need to run a SQL Server cluster, prep the second SQL Server
Question
cluster.
was management server and operations
And
manager. So
both
both of them.
Both of them. Today, it's a single control plane, single management plane in this. But in the next release that will come in a month and a half or so, we'll have the redundancy provision there.
Got it.
Okay. And actually, the simplification of the deployment of a cloud is interesting to our cloud customers because they sell private clouds, on-prem clouds to their end customers. So how quickly they can bring up those clouds is actually important to them. So they like the fact that it's easy and quick way to install the cloud for end customers. So here are the typical things that you would do. Now, once you have provisioned the cloud, it's ready for use. You need monitoring, obviously health checks of the entire system, etc. Monitoring other metrics, the capacity, the utilization. You need plugins to configure all your other subsystems that you want to integrate with, identify all the critical metrics, redirection of the log files, analyzing log files, etc., etc. So these are some of the tasks, but the list is pretty long actually, honestly. So what we have done is we have sort of automated all this under the ops manager. Let's go to, so the way this works is you have the cloud, there is a register command basically. You go and register the command with an ops manager. It goes and registers, and then once you have it registered, successfully you will start collecting the metrics and redirecting all the log files, etc. So Jaideep, I'm going to switch this to your screen. If you're ready, showcase the ops manager screens.
I'll just
Okay.
I'll just show the
So-
registration.
Are you registering the cloud?
Yes.
Right? So what does it need? So Rovius CTL registered. What else are we passing? The name of
So we
the
get the license file that has all the information that is kind of required to identify yourself and connect to the Ops Manager.
Right. So Ops Manager is a service, right? It's a service. You can run it on-prem or use a cloud. So you have to register your cloud, give it a name, and get the API keys and a license key that you would actually go and install on Rovius product. Once you have done that, then you run simple command saying Rovius register with this license, and it goes and registers the cloud for you. Now, once it is registered, you have all the data, the monitoring, log files, etc., being pushed over to the Ops Manager. And Ops Manager screen will switch to the Ops Manager screen. So this is the administrator of the cloud. They will log in into the Ops Manager. And I've got 2 clouds in my account, just say London and Munich. I've got 2 data centers. Let's take a look at the detailed statistics on these clouds. So it shows you the summary where the utilization is today, how much is consumed, how much is free. It gives you a count of all the virtual machines, the storage volume, snapshot, templates and IP addresses, etc., etc. These are typical metrics that you care about. Are they available in the cloud or not? And then we have activities. This is the log of all the events and alarms that are raised in the system. And then you have monitoring data. This is all the typical CPU, memory, swap, all those networking metrics that we collect. You can zoom in, zoom out, take a look at all that, different charts. Let's look at the log files, right? So log files are basically collated. We send all the log files into a elk stack. They are all indexed, but individually also they are available to you. Now, one of the most interesting thing about this logs is how easy it is for debugging any problems in the system, right? So I was running these 2 clouds, and I suddenly a user experienced a VM failure, couldn't launch a VM. Let's go ahead and track where that failure occurred. Actually, we can take a look at the log files. So Jaideep, can you go to the log files there? So here's an example of a VM failed. It is in the log file. It's in the audit log. We take a look at it. We identify what was going on in the system or on that particular host where the VM launch failed. We look at the metrics, the CPU, memory, swap, etc., etc. That could be the culprit for failures. And then go back to the log file. We identify the log at that particular point in time. Look at the error. Can you do the errors? So you look at the stack trace. There is a stack trace because of that failure. VM launch failed. We could simply click on create ticket. Now this create ticket is basically creating a support ticket to us. Our support guys get this ticket on Zendesk or whatever systems we use. They can file a ticket. Now the beauty is, it took all the snippet of the log files, all the metrics that were occurring at that point in time, and then sends it over to the support portal. Now typically today, without Ops Manager, if you have to ask somebody to give me the log files, identify where the failure occurred in the log file, etc., that takes weeks. Now this is basically minutes, not even minutes, how quickly you can identify it. So this is an excellent feature for debugging purposes or getting in touch with our support guys, right?
So that correlation was pretty straightforward. It was just timestamps.
Just
Was there anything else fancier that you might be doing to try to correlate events?
So we
to
are working on a bunch of IDs that we are correlating through Cloud Stack, through different components, and then trying to put that, and it will be added to this correlation drop down. So right now we did a time-based correlation. Each operation in
Cloud Stack would have ID, and that will go through all subsystem of Cloud Stack and hypervisor storage, etc. And you can see all logs kind of in the same way, and you can show multiple logs together.
So from a bunch of different subsystems correlated together. Got it.
Operation. From an operation perspective, this operation where all it tracked through the subsystem.
So now you don't just have timestamp. Now you've got subsystem correlations
IDs
based
as
on
well.
ID.
Yeah, matching IDs.
You're helping us build, maintain, manage our internal private cloud, which has been harder to do. But we still haven't fixed how we do procurement for new hardware or when we're going to run out of
So,
do we have any,
today
like,
we don't
forecasting?
have predictive, sort of when are you going to run out? We can give you where you are,
Yeah.
how much you're using.
Yep.
We don't have predictive quite yet to know.
We are building the capacity dashboards.
Okay.
We are building the capacity dashboards that will be also available as a part of this.
Okay.
Okay.
Because we are tracking each utilization, periodically, so we know the trend, and it's just matter of putting the.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm thinking about problems I still have on-prem after the solution, I still have to figure out when I'm going to run out of capacity.
Yes.
That hasn't been solved for me yet. If you can add that
this
to
will
what you
be-
got.
this
Hopefully, the hybrid helps you alleviate some of the problem.
Yes.
In the meantime, you can go provision it at Amazon, right? And it's seamless, and you can bring the workload back. So that hopefully will fix some of the problems in this elasticity. I mean, we do see elasticity as a problem, and the first step we are using to solve that problem is, hey, use your hybrid to expand and repatriate the workload.
Now that's a good segue into hybrid demo actually. Let's switch to the other things are actually updates and patches. I mentioned, we deliver the patches to the control plane. So you could look at all the patches that are available for that particular environment, and then selectively you can apply the upgrades and patches. So it's much more simpler and foolproof method of picking the right set of packages.